This is the first in a series of videos that is providing an overview of the Wales safeguarding procedures as they apply to children at risk of harm. The series of resources and videos will include separate videos for each of the parts of the procedures, with a video talking through the main changes to the procedures and a supporting video that will give a demonstration of how the app can be used in practice. The aim and purpose of these resources is, as I say, to provide an overview in the structure and content of the new procedures as they relate to children. However, this series of videos will be providing an insight into how the procedures require a new approach to safeguarding children. As we move from the All Wales child protection procedures into the use of the new Wales safeguarding procedures, some of the stages may seem familiar. However, our approach and application of practice at each of those stages needs to be reconsidered. The purpose of the resource is also to raise awareness of how these procedures relate to safeguarding roles at a multi-agency level. And as described, the resources, particularly through the supporting videos to go with this series of videos, will provide guidance on how to access them via the app or via the website. The app can either be accessed on the internet following the link here, or can be downloaded from an app store on a smartphone by typing in Wales safeguarding procedures and following the link of the image here. The procedures are being introduced and implemented under the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act of 2014 that we saw come into practice in 2016. Following on from the Act was some supporting guidance referred to as Working Together to Safeguard People, Volume 5, Handling Individual Cases to Protect Children at Risk. And since the implementation of the Act, we have been using this guidance alongside the All Wales child protection procedures. We are now using the Wales safeguarding procedures, which have replaced the All Wales child protection procedures. And a note that these procedures are implemented in response to Volume 5 and in response to the requirements set out in the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. And this series of videos is focusing on the section that relates to children and young people at risk of harm. So as I say, we're moving from use of the All Wales child protection procedures that have been in operation since 2008 through to the new Wales safeguarding procedures that have come into force in 2020. These are national procedures that detail the essential roles and responsibilities for practitioners to ensure that they safeguard children and adults who are at risk of abuse and neglect. So as you see, the same set of procedures is in place with specific sections relating to children and a specific section relating to adults at risk. The procedures, as already alluded to, will be helping practitioners to apply the legislation and statutory guidance that's been issued under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. Throughout the procedures, you will find pointers for practice. The procedures in themselves set out the stages that need to be followed. The pointers for practice provide information as to how to complete the tasks or the stages set out in the procedures. A bit like a toolbox or a manual to help you in practice. And those pointers of practice draw on the latest research and practice developments. It's really easy to miss the glossary when we enter into the procedures, But it is important that everybody takes the time to familiarise themselves with the glossary and in particular the terms that are being used. It's important that every practitioner is using the same terminology in the same way, irrespective of their role, discipline, or the agency they work for. And to point out that these procedures are designed to standardise practice across the whole of Wales and between all the agencies with a responsibility for safeguarding children and young people. The procedures themselves are set out in a number of sections, as you can see appearing on the screen now. Each of the sections effectively describes the stages of the procedures that are to be implemented. We start with section 1 that defines the principles and effective practice for working with children who may be at risk. It also includes the definitions of a children at risk. It's on the basis of these principles and definitions that our duty to report a child at risk may well be triggered, which sees us move then into section 2 of the procedures. Section 2 covers the processes that need to be followed in order to make the report about a concern about a child who may be at risk. Section 3, which is in 2 parts, then covers the decision-making processes, the activities that need to be taken to respond to that report, and any activities relating to initial child protection conferences. As the case progresses through the procedures, we then move on to section 4, which covers the responsibilities, the requirements in relation to care and support protection planning for children and young people. Section 5 then deals with any safeguarding allegations and concerns that are made about practitioners and those in positions of trust who may be putting children in a position of being at risk. And finally, section 6 includes additional All Wales practice guides. These are in a similar vein to the pointers for practice. These practice guides will focus on specific aspects of practice in particular and should be considered alongside sections 1 to 5 of these procedures. So we start with section 1, which covers the safeguarding principles and elements of effective practice. Before we come into the principles of safeguarding, it is important to remind ourselves that these safeguarding procedures are being issued under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act and under Part 7 in particular. There is a relationship, however, between this part of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act and other parts that you see on the screen. In particular, general functions, which sets out duties around information, advice and assistance services, early intervention services, the duties and the principles that underpin our approach to practice, underpin our approach to supporting children and young people. It's the principles and duties in Part 2 that we see underpin the new procedures for safeguarding. The activities followed through these procedures also have a relationship with Part 3 and 4, which refer to the duties around assessing the care and support needs of children and young people and the activities required to then meet those needs. It also has a relationship with Part 10, which covers our duties and responsibilities in relation to the provision of advocacy services. We also see in this piece of legislation a very strong focus on outcomes. This is not necessarily a concept or term that has featured highly in the use of previous procedures. However, we see it not only in our day-to-day practice to support children and young people, but you will see strong reference to the child's personal outcomes as we work our way through the Wales safeguarding procedures. So the duties placed on all practitioners under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act are set out on the screen in front of you now. The Code of Practice under Part 2 says we should have regard to the following elements, meaning we've given consideration, reflected, acknowledged, actively sought to promote these aspects of an individual's life. So the pink box applies to all adults, children, and carers. That's that we have regard to their views, wishes, and feelings. So this is the views, wishes, and feelings of the child in this context. That we're respecting their dignity, enabling and facilitating their full participation, and that we're having regard to their characteristics, culture, and beliefs. The yellow box then applies in addition to the pink box in relation to adults. And then for children and young people, the green box applies in addition to the pink box in respect of children, as I say. And that's that we have regard to the upbringing of the child by the child's family, insofar as doing so is consistent with their well-being, and that we are actively having regard to the views, wishes, and feelings of any individual with parental responsibility, again, insofar as is practical and consistent with the child's well-being. We also have duties in relation to the active offer, specifically in relation to the Welsh language, in order to ensure that a child feels comfortable and able to share their views, wishes, and feelings, to enable them, to promote them, to facilitate their engagement in discussions and decisions that may be being made in relation to their lives. You will see throughout these new safeguarding procedures how strong an emphasis that is placed on the voice, on the involvement and engagement of the child and young person themselves. There is also a duty to promote the human rights of the individual, and in this context, it will be the human rights of the child as per the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. And as already referred to, the duties that are placed on us then in relation to the provision of appropriate advocacy, in order to ensure, in a similar way to the reference to the active offer, that the child is fully supported in order to express their views, wishes, and feelings, to have those heard and considered in any discussions and decisions that may be made. The Social Services and Wellbeing Act then is underpinned by the following principles. These aren't simply statements. These principles describe the practice approach that should be adopted when working to the new procedures, when supporting and working with children, young people, and families. And at various points during these videos, there'll be a demonstration of how the activities within the procedures will be linking through to the principles you see in front of you now. So we start with the child-centered approach to safeguarding. What is it? What does it look like? It's important to remember right at the beginning that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. When we're thinking about our approach to safeguarding children and young people, we need to remember that engaging with and listening to what children and young people say about what's happening to them should be the cornerstone of effective intervention and support. So how is this child-centered approach different? If we think the old approach, the way in which we've previously worked, we will have come at safeguarding from a position that we as the professionals know what's best for the child or the young person. We will have been led by processes and systems, and the activities and the approaches that we will have adopted have very much been about doing things for or to the child and family. And the child at the centre of all of this process has not had a strong or clear enough voice. The child-centred approach sees us move to an attitude and approach that actually the child or the young person does know themselves. In some instances, they may know themselves better than other individuals or adults around them. Our approach is very much led by the interests of the child and, where appropriate, the family, and that we are seeing the child as an individual in their own right. We're working with the child and family. We're working with them to achieve what matters to the child or young person, to be focused on their outcomes. And there is clear voice and control of the child wherever possible. So in practice, this means we're seeing and speaking to the child as often as is possible, with the aim of establishing their trust so that they feel that they can be open and honest. One of the strong references through these procedures is the importance and the need to understand the daily lived experience of the child. And as much as possible that we develop that understanding through their own experience, as opposed to the descriptions of a child's life by other people. We're aiming to understand what a typical day looks like for them. Maybe that's the typical day as it stands now, but the typical day that we should be aspiring to for this child or young person. In taking a child-centered approach, we're establishing what they would like to see change in their daily lives. Understand what that child wants as an outcome, what's important to them. However, it is important that we are putting the child's safeguarding interests wherever is required. And on some occasions, that may mean that we're putting those safeguarding interests over their wishes. In addition to the principles of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, these procedures are also underpinned by safeguarding principles. So the principles that should be underpinning our safeguarding systems and approaches, not just the systems, but the practice approach that we take. So these principles include the importance of putting the child's wishes, needs, and well-being first. That we're doing that as early as possible, so that they receive the support they need to prevent a problem from escalating wherever possible. It's important that all practitioners are alert to the needs of children and young people, but are able to identify potential or actual or suspected abuse or risk of abuse or harm, and that everybody is clear about the action that should be taken. Information sharing will be at the core of enabling us to do this. So all practitioners need to be sharing appropriate information and having direct access to advice to discuss any concerns about a child that they may have. The principles also clearly set out that all practitioners should be using their professional judgment in order to put the child's needs and their personal outcomes at the centre of what we're doing, in order that the right solution can be found for each individual child or young person according to their specific situation. All practitioners need to be working in a multi-agency and cooperative way. In a cooperative way with other partner agencies, but also in a cooperative way with the child and the family themselves. By doing this, we safeguard and promote a child's well-being. It means we're recording decisions appropriately, regularly reviewing progress against the outcomes that are set out in care and support plans. And finally, all practitioners who come into contact with children must be able to access professional strategic leadership, which supports them to achieve the best desired outcomes for the child. So we now come on to the part in section 1 that covers the definitions that are relevant to safeguarding children at risk. It's important to remember that the term safeguarding refers to a spectrum of support that covers all of our activities and responsibilities that mean we're taking action to promote the welfare of children and young people through to the action that is needed to then protect them from harm. So there is an element within safeguarding of protection, an element of prevention, that we're ensuring by both preventing and protecting that children grow up with safe and effective care, and that where required, the action we take is done so in order to support children and people to have the best outcomes. Section 1 of the procedures, as you will shortly see, does explore the role of prevention. However, the thrust of these new procedures will primarily be focused on the protection element of safeguarding. The definition of a child at risk that is now detailed in the procedures, which was initially defined in Part 7 of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act 2014, is any person who is aged under 18. Any person aged under 18 who may be at risk. And by that we mean that even if abuse, neglect, or other kinds of harm have not actually occurred, they are likely to occur without the relevant support from services. So bringing those two elements together, the definition of a child at risk for the purposes of these procedures is anyone under the age of 18 who is experiencing or is at risk of experiencing abuse, neglect, and/or harm, and has needs for care and support, regardless of whether the authority is meeting any of those needs. Harm within these procedures is described as ill treatment of a child or young person, which could include sexual abuse, neglect, emotional abuse, psychological abuse. We will also see financial abuse and wider forms of abuse. It includes the impairment of physical or mental health, which could include that suffered from seeing or hearing another person suffer ill treatment. It also includes the impairment of physical, intellectual, emotional, social or behavioural development, and again, including that suffered from seeing or hearing another person suffer ill treatment. Within the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, within these well safeguarding procedures, we will still be operating to the duties set out under Section 47 of the Children Act 1989. Which states that if we have concerns about likely or actual significant harm to a child, then we are required to initiate Section 47 inquiries, which will be covered in one of the later videos. There is actually no statutory definition of significant harm. Therefore, it is important to note where the question of whether harm is significant turns on the child's health or development, the child's health or development is to be compared with that which could reasonably be expected of a similar child. So, taking some of these elements of harm, the procedures describe physical abuse, which means we're deliberately hurting a child or a young person. And there are some examples on the screen and further details sitting in the procedures of the examples of physical abuse that are considered under these procedures. It also includes fabricating or inducing illness. These being the circumstances when a carer or parent actively promotes a child's sickness by exaggerating it, not treating the real problems, fabricating or falsifying signs, and/or deliberately making them ill. The definition of harm also includes sexual abuse, and within the procedures, there are two categories of sexual abuse that are described. The category of contact, which involves touching or making physical contact with a child, and non-contact sexual abuse, such as grooming, exploitation, persuading children to perform sexual acts over the internet, and possibly flashing. We also have emotional abuse, which is the ongoing emotional maltreatment of a child. It's sometimes referred to as psychological abuse. And this form of abuse can seriously damage a child's emotional health and development. Examples of emotional or psychological abuse are set out on the screen in front of you. We also see in the procedures the introduction of financial abuse in respect of children and young people. So this is a new category of abuse introduced through these procedures. Whilst it might be less prevalent for a child, it could well occur, and some of the indicators of financial abuse could include not meeting the child's needs for care and support, which are to be provided through allowances and grants, for example, direct payments, complaints that finances and/or personal property is missing, defrauding a child, and/or putting the child under pressure because of money or other personal property. Within the procedures, there is also the description of other forms of abuse that a child or young person may either experience directly themselves, or they may witness other people being subjected to these types of abuse. So we see domestic abuse. The description of domestic abuse being an incident or pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive or threatening behaviour, violence or abuse between those aged 16 or over, who are or have been intimate partners or family members, regardless of gender or sexuality. We also see a description of peer relationship abuse, which is a pattern of actual or threatened acts of physical, sexual and/or emotional abuse by an adolescent between the ages of 13 and 16 against a current or former partner. Honour-based abuse is also included, which is described as abuse and/or violence committed by people for behaviours which are against the family's or community's expectations. And we also see the definition and description of online abuse. So again, these are additional new considerations, new categories, definitions referred to in these new procedures. Neglect is another key element of harm to a child or young person. The description of neglect is the failure to meet basic physical, emotional, or psychological needs, which is likely to result in impairment of health or development. There are a number of different types of neglect described within the procedures, which are on the screen in front of you now. These include medical neglect, supervisory neglect, nutritional neglect, educational neglect, physical neglect, and identity neglect. One of the practice guides within section 6 of the procedures is specifically focused on safeguarding children from neglect. So the details sitting behind these descriptions is further expanded within the Orwell's practice guide on safeguarding children from neglect. And finally, the procedures also refer to risks from other actual or potential harm to a child or young person, which may result from any of the following: criminal exploitation, child sexual exploitation, child trafficking, radicalisation, modern slavery, and female genital mutilation. Within section 6 of the procedures are the Orwell's practice guides, with practice guides relating to these specific areas, these specific sources of potential or actual harm to children and young people. So it is advised that they are considered alongside section 1 of these procedures. So we've considered the principles, we've considered the definitions. It is important also, as was referred to earlier, that we do give consideration to the early intervention and prevention element of safeguarding. Early intervention can protect children from experiencing abuse, neglect, or harm. It will help to avoid any problems escalating and reduce the need for safeguarding inquiries and interventions. But just as importantly, it will have long-term benefits for the child's health and well-being. It is important that early help is offered to children that are identified as vulnerable to possible abuse and neglect, and their families as early as possible. So, when we think about identifying and responding to emerging concerns, some questions that we could ask ourselves at the point in which we are identifying concerns could include: what are my concerns about the child's well-being that, if not addressed, could cause harm? Am I concerned that parenting capacity and family and environmental factors, maybe poverty, for example, are impacting on the well-being of the child and their vulnerability to abuse and neglect? What's the evidence I've got to support these concerns? And is there anything that I can do to help address these concerns? In the procedures, there is reference to the importance of all practitioners working with children and families to consider the following steps. The first step being that practitioners work with children and their families to avoid situations arising that are likely to lead to the child experiencing abuse, neglect, and harm. For example, that might include building the family's resistance, their assets, and their strengths. If this is not effective, step 2 sees practitioners identifying and addressing emerging concerns that, if they are not resolved, could result in the child experiencing abuse, neglect, and harm. When we're thinking about responding to emerging concerns, we see a close connection then with the duties and the different parts of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. Where we are responding to emerging concerns at an early intervention and prevention point, we need to be making sure that we are operating to the duties that are set out in Part 2 of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. If the level of response to those concerns we have about a child or young person is at such a level that requires a care and support assessment and plan to be put in place, then Parts 3 and 4 of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act will be put in place, with social services leading on the assessment and the development of the plan, but a reminder that it is everybody's responsibility to safeguard and protect children and young people. And finally, it could be that the response required to emerging concerns is at the level of Part 7 of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, because we see a child at risk. And this is where the well safeguarding procedures then come into play. So it's important that when we're considering early intervention and prevention, we're giving consideration to appropriate but also proportionate interventions. And the next couple of slides give you some indicators, give you some considerations in relation to appropriate and proportionate interventions. We should be giving consideration to a holistic approach, not focusing solely on one aspect, but understanding the relationship between a range of issues that may be playing out for a family. Not seeing the child in isolation, but supporting and working with the family. And in doing so, that we're working with them as equal partners to plan and deliver the interventions. In doing this, we're empowering the family to have control over their day-to-day lives and achieve what matters to them, and more importantly, achieve what matters to the child. We should be considering innovative and creative solutions. Who and what is available in their local networks and communities. We need to be making sure that timely interventions are delivered in the right place. That we don't expect families to have to engage with multiple service offers right at the beginning or all at the same time. And that we're selecting a diverse range of services that consider all the needs of individual family members. It also means we're giving consideration to flexibility and recognising that individual family needs and circumstances will change, and that we are ready and in a position to be able to respond to those changes. It's important that we give consideration to particular families' needs, for example, age and stage of development, maybe disability or communication needs individuals may have. How are we making sure that we're able to identify and respond to emerging or new needs as they arise? And finally, that there is shared ownership and active contributions by all practitioners involved with the child and the family. You will see throughout these procedures a very strong reference, and with that requirements, to work with the child and family. This is where we see the move to a real child-centered approach. So it's essential that the child and family are actively engaged in determining the best way in which their needs can be met. The child must be seen and listened to, and that their wishes and feelings are considered, whatever the method of communication that's chosen. We know that children and their parents are most likely to engage with early help services if they're timely and accessible. If time is spent by practitioners forming positive and trusting relationships with the family, that misconceptions about safeguarding services are dispelled for those families, and that information is shared openly and honestly. For many, this will mean a different way of working. It will mean that we're forming and developing relationships in a way that we haven't before. It will mean that we are maybe providing more active intervention support at an earlier point than we may have done previously. So to bring section 1 to a close, a reminder that the procedures do bring about a significant shift in culture and practice. And the important points to note in relation to section 1 are that we are moving away from procedures that are in paper form. So the folder with the Orwell's child protection procedures is no longer. They are replaced with procedures that are alive electronic documents that will be updated as and when is required. It's also important to note that these national procedures will also run alongside any procedures that have been agreed and implemented by the regional safeguarding boards. So the national procedures do not sit in isolation. They need to be considered alongside any regional safeguarding board procedures. We're moving from procedures that were underpinned by a focus on paperwork and compliance with policies and procedures. These procedures do set out the system and the processes that are to be followed. But what's important to note is that those stages, those steps, those activities that are undertaken are underpinned by the child-centred preventative principles and the duties of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. We're very much moving from a culture of doing to the family to working co-productively with the family. And we see the continuation of a definition of a child at risk. However, under these new procedures, we now see broader categories and broader definitions of the child at risk. And with those broader categories, will bring the duties then to report any concerns we may have of children who meet the definitions.